Levi, welcome to the Way of Champions podcast, man.
Hey, thanks for having me, John. I really appreciate it.
It's awesome. We were just catching up beforehand here. For anyone watching this on YouTube, there's the Green Bay Packers jerseys in the background. So he's coming to us from Green Bay, Wisconsin. And Levi, why don't you just tell people a little bit about yourself and what you do, and then maybe why you wrote this book.
Sure. Thanks so much, John, for having me on. And to give you the quick elevator speech, I grew up in a really small town in Ohio, and I went to the University of Akron for college. And I was a communication major. I thought I was going to read the evening news. That was kind of going to be my gig. And I took a class as an extracurricular, and it was called Intro to Coaching. I'd always liked sports. I was a captain of my high school football team. I was the powder puff coach. That was my first official coaching job.
Nice.
And I took this class, and this guy walked in, and just instantly I said, that's what I want to be when I grow up. So year 4 into my major, it completely changed everything. I went to get my master's and work for this gentleman as a graduate assistant at Akron. I was in the Department of Sports Science, so we taught a lot of the classes there. I ended up coaching a class or teaching a class called Coaching Football. And I still can't believe I got paid to do that. But I started coaching with this gentleman, and I just, loved it even more than I thought I would. Like there's so many things in life that you try and they might let you down. For me, I thought coaching was going to be amazing, and it just exceeded my expectations. And I was an assistant coach for 4 years at this school in Ohio. And I just kind of felt a calling in my heart. Hey, it's time to be a head football coach. And I was excited to receive my first job. I was young. I might have been 23, 24 years old, somewhere in there. And I was at a school for 4 years in Ohio, and I moved to a bigger school. Actually, the shirt I'm wearing right now, it has the lead acronym on there. But I was there for 2 years, and then in 2020, we moved to Green Bay to be a head coach here. So I've been a football coach for the last 15 years, but I'm also John, I'm one of those people. I always have a lot of pots on the burner, right? So I'm also a certified trainer for the Positive Coaching Alliance. And that has been, to date, my most rewarding and satisfying and exciting work that I get to do. And then recently I started as a coach developer for USA Hockey as well. So
Nice.
through
Did you play hockey too?
You know what? Not ice hockey.
Right.
No. And it's kind of fascinating, John. Through the Positive Coaching Alliance, one of the trainers there, big hockey guy. And it's I love watching hockey. I like playing hockey as a kid. And he said, Levi, we would really like you to come help us with our coach developer program, even though you're not a hockey coach, right? Our curriculum is about coaching and teaching, and you have plenty of experience in that arena. So that's why I've been able to get on with USA Hockey. And through all of my journey, 5 years ago or so, I decided to pursue the doctorate in sport and performance psychology, which allowed to some adjunct teaching jobs and such. So I always got a lot going on, and thank you to my wife, right, who helps with the kids and different things at that time, so I'm able to coach. But I just love coaching, and that's kind of ultimately why I wrote the book, because I believe in having a coaching philosophy, and I wanted to share mine with the world.
Yeah, awesome. It was a great story, and I asked about the hockey piece because I think this is one of the most important things that Jerry and I try to get across a lot, which is, sometimes the best type of coaching development is when you're in the room with coaches of different sports.
Yeah.
Because now there's not the ego. Like, you're not going to any USA Hockey clinic going, I got the biggest hockey resume here, right? You're like, look, I can't skate with you. I can't do that. Like, but let's meet in the middle. Like, and talk about coaching, motivating, communicating, inspiring, building teams. That's coaching, right?
Correct.
And then the X's and O's, that's just hockey. That's the training piece. And so I think it's great because, again, I do way more than 50% of my own work outside of the sport that I played and coach most, right? So
Yeah.
and it's great. And so I go into a ski racing organization, be like, I've never raced skiing. I can't tell people how to make that turn at 80 miles an hour. Let's talk about coaching.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So influences for you? Tell me about your best coach.
What's funny about that question is that question is in my book. So my book sort of guides the reader through developing their own coaching philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, one of those questions, as I taught those classes at Akron, Intro to Coaching, Coaching Football, the first day we would always say, "Who's your best coach?" Right? And we would have athletes share that story, and then we would say, conversely, who's your worst coach?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know that people tend to coach the way they were coached.
Right.
Right. So that's an important exercise. And for me, John, and I write this in my book, my best coach didn't wear a whistle around her neck. It was my mother. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm able to pick my mother is because the original definition of a coach, right, is just a vehicle to get you from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm.
Right. That is what a coach is. It's to get someone from where they are to where they want to go. And I write a little bit about her, but what I think was really fascinating, John, and we hear this a lot in Who's Your Best Coach exercise. She never really sat me down and told me the importance of having a positive attitude, or I'm sure she told me, you need to work hard in these things, but more importantly, she walked the walk. Right. I had a front row seat every day, and I watched someone just put people above herself,
Mm-hmm.
the most loving person I know, work extremely hard. I'm biased, but probably the most positive person since the invention of Ted Lasso, the TV show, right? Not even a real person. And then just the consistency to do that each and every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as I was developing my own coaching philosophy and I'm reflecting back on my best coach, I'm saying, okay, what traits are important to me, right? And not only my mother who I lived with, but other coaches I had. I had a tennis coach and a freshman football coach. His name was Kevin Sacco,
Mm-hmm.
and he was the first coach who treated me as an equal. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were in this together. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember being in high school thinking this is kind of a revolutionary idea, right? That,
Mm-hmm.
that we can work together to solve an issue because we both have the same interest, right? We
Right.
both.
I get to weigh in. I get a say
Yeah,
in the matter. I have a little autonomy. Yeah.
correct. So I thought about him, and then I started thinking about, gentlemen that I've coached with, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the traits that I saw in some of these outstanding individuals? And then, hey, leaders are readers, right? I know you're an avid reader. I am myself. And I thought about, Vince Lombardi and Lou Holtz and Tony Dungy and Joe Ehrman and Jimmy Valvano. And I started thinking about all of these character qualities. Like if it was a create a coach in a laboratory,
Mm-hmm.
what are the characteristics that I'm excited about?
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote these down. I had a bunch, and I finally narrowed that down to 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I think 4 is a really powerful, 4 seasons in a year, 4 terms, 4 years for a president. You can just go on and on about the number 4, but it's for me, it's easy to remember the acronym. Just, something simple like that. It's easy to have a mission statement and kind of, write a huge paragraph that maybe not everyone's going to remember, but to boil them down to like, what is it I'm really trying to do with my time here?
Mm-hmm.
Like if people remember me for how I coach, how is it? Right. And so for me, I'm focusing on love, effort, attitude, and discipline.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome. And lead, right? The title of your book, LEAD, Coach's Playbook and how to positively impact the world through those 4 things: love, effort, attitude, and discipline. It's great. I mean, I remember when you first sent me the book, you sent me a PDF. I'm like, oh, I like that. Like that's great, right? Because this is what coaches need to do. I think also in our formative years, we have coaches who do the opposite of that, maybe, right? Do the opposite of what we want to be. And we learn from them as well. Like
Yeah.
we've all had coaches that go, I don't want to be that woman. I don't want to be
Yeah.
that guy. And so I'm sure you had those same experiences as well of like, what do if I'm going to coach, what do I not want to be like?
Yeah. And I tell you what, when we would do those exercises in a college class, I taught a lot of the athletes, a lot of the Division I football athletes would be in the room, and they would talk about the best coach they ever had and kind of, oh yeah, they cared about me, this and that. When it came time to talk about our worst coach,
Yeah.
I mean, you'd have to cut people off after 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I witnessed, it was a really powerful moment in my young teaching career. I witnessed a kid stand up on his desk. He stood up, tears in his eyes, and started beating on his chest about the disrespect he felt from this former coach.
Wow.
And I was just getting into coaching, and you kind of have to stop and think of, yeah, these are big big ticket items that are happening here that cause trauma way down the road. And
yeah, I mean, that's trauma right there. Like that's him processing trauma. And I think like lucky for you that you saw this. Like I remember being a young coach and thinking, they don't remember what I say. No one's going to remember this in 5 or 10 years, but they do.
They do. And I write my example in the book, and I ask readers to do the same. Like, let's reflect on your worst coach. And I always say, let's refer to them as Coach X or Coach Z, right? You never know who might be in the room with you at the time. But I'll share you with this. I might have been 20, 21 years old. I was just getting into coaching, and I was in a coach's office with a man that I really respected. I mean, his X's and O's just, he's probably forgotten more about football than I'll come to know. And we were all kind of sitting around, and I liked this guy a lot. He had a funny personality. A kid walked to the door, and he knocked on the door. He had a fundraiser for him or something like that. And this coach I was sitting next to leaned up and he said, "Hey, John, are you ready for the game on Friday night?" And John's eyes got so big and excited. I wish you could have seen. It was a kid on Christmas morning. And the coach said, "Good, that's one day closer to the JV game where you'll be playing."
Oh.
And I remember, I think this coach did it for a laugh. He was kind of a sarcastic guy, and he's kind of looking around the coach's office to think who thinks that's funny. And I remember no one thinking it was funny. And me as a 20-year-old kid who was, immature myself in my own ways, but I said, that's not cool, right? Like that is not cool at all. And by the way, how do you think this young man's effort was at practice that day?
Oh, I mean, forget about it.
Forget about it, right? He's not working hard. He's not on the scout team supposed to make our starters better, right? He's not giving great effort. So I just remember in that moment, even though it didn't happen to me, saying, I will never demean a player like that, right? Like that is not how I'm going to coach. So
and
that's just an example.
Like I grew up with a lot of coaches who coached through sarcasm like that. And I remember, I feel like maybe, I grew up in an Irish family where there was kind of a lot of that stuff, and it didn't bother me as much as others. I felt like at the time, I think when I think back on it, I was like, ooh, that wasn't great. But yet, like you said, you tend to coach like you were coached. And when I was a young coach, I don't think that harsh, but would definitely use sarcasm. Right. And then when you really think about it, like that's one of the biggest things that I try to be really intentional about in my coaching is not to do that, because it just never doesn't make anyone better.
Correct.
It's never, I don't think sarcasm has ever made a kid perform better on the next play.
Correct. And people don't understand it, right? Especially youth athletes, right? Who might not have as much life experience. They might not know your intent. So definitely no room for sarcasm when it comes to coaching.
Yeah. So what was your light bulb moment that said, I'm writing a book? Because I think we all have them, right? And it's not like, I'm going to the gym. Like, it's a big commitment to put this down in a book.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll answer that maybe a long-winded version, but my final project for my master's program was to come up with my own coaching philosophy. And I wrote, a novel, so to speak, for that. And the coach said, nobody's going to remember this, right? Like you've got an elevator speech, right? You've got 60 seconds, spit it out. He handed me Pete Carroll's book.
And Forever.
Win Forever. And Coach Carroll says, hey, write down your philosophy in 25 words or less. That's it. And I remember it taking me a long time to boil it down and to find this acronym LEAD. And when I became a head coach, that's what our program was about. And we put it on every T-shirt, everything we could, right? We wanted to be about LEAD, and it's traveled with me through and through. I can't remember the exact time when I decided I want to write a book, but I do remember slowly working on it and then having a conversation with a gentleman. His name's Justin Sua. You might know him. He's mental performance coach for the Tampa Bay Rays. And he's like, Levi, if you want to write a book, then you need to start a blog and you need to start writing articles and publish them. He's like, that's how I started out. And it was only like my mom and my aunt who read it. He's like, but the important thing is you are creating content and you are putting it out for the world to see. And you're getting over this fear of you're not good enough to do it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's probably what I struggled with the most, John, is I don't think learning comes very easy to me. But I'm a try hard guy. Like I am a work hard guy. I have 2 master's degrees and a doctorate, and it's not because I'm the smartest person in the room. I promise you. I love, there's a Will Smith quote, and he said, if you and I get on a treadmill at the same time, either you're getting off first or I'm going to die on this treadmill. And ever since I saw that, I just kind of embraced that. Yeah, I'm an effort guy. My wife graduated #1 in her class. She's a physical therapist, and she's naturally very smart. It might take her a minute to do something. It takes me a lot longer, but I get it done. Right. And I think of all those characteristics, love, effort, attitude, discipline. Discipline is what I'm the best at, just because, and that kind of goes with effort, right? But I'm going to get after it every single day, right? The alarm clock goes off 3:57 each morning, and it's up and get after it. But to answer your question, you asked, when's the light bulb moment? So Justin told me, start writing a blog, and I did. And then I heard someone say, you've probably heard this, you need to state your goals out loud. You need to tell other people. So I told a young man that I was coaching, I said, Ethan, I'm going to write a book by the time I turn 35. Okay, coach, one of those things. I'm slowly writing this book. I've got the idea in my head. Yeah, won't this be cool? About my 33rd and a half birthday, he texted me out of the blue. I hadn't talked to him in like 6-7 years. He said, Coach, how's the book coming?
That's awesome.
And I said, all right. So we got to start this, get it going now. And I did not make it by my 35th birthday, like I said I would, but I got it done by my 36th, right?
Yeah.
So it was one of those, an accountability partner, right? It was a young man I coached. And if it wasn't for that text message, who knows? Maybe I'm still dragging my feet on it. But
it's so funny. I mean, I've done the same. Like every moment matters. I hired my editor, and she said, "Well, when do you want to get this done?" I'm like, "You tell me, and just give me dates, and I'll get it done." Like this is how I made it through college and the master's. Like I work on deadlines, right? Yeah. I don't plan ahead. I don't whatever, but give me a deadline, and it will be done. And and then it was great. In the last book, The Champion Teammate, Jerry and I were accountability partners. So, we decided to write this book together. And then I I did the same thing as you. I really kind of didn't do anything for a while, and all of a sudden he sent me 50 pages. He's like, "You got anything for me?" I'm like, "No." you know. And so yeah, I love that. I love that kind of stuff. But what a cool story. What a cool story that a former athlete can really contribute to this. Have you ever told him that story?
I've reached out to him. He's really remarkable young person. One of those kids that you just wish that what you just wish he might have had a better high school experience than what he had. It's like you wish you could have given him more than what you had, because he was so deserving. He gave you every ounce of energy and desire, great attitude all the time. So very special young man. He's went on. He's a pastor, married, kids, very successful in what he's doing. But yeah, I have shared that story with him. So
Love it. So let's dive into the book. I mean, we've talked about your best and worst. These are parts of the book as well, your best and worst coach and light bulb moments. But like what talk about these concepts. And maybe I'm trying to think, like let's start with love. I mean, because we talk all the time about love that's the basis of everything, right? And it's not a word that we use often or enough in sports, but it really is like, without love is nothing. I mean, when you were talking about your coaching philosophy, right, and what would it be in 25 words or less? I mean, for me, it would probably be, they don't care how much you know till they know how much you care.
Yeah.
That'd probably be mine.
Yeah. So to answer your question, one of the reasons I love this acronym so much is not only is it based on what I've known in my own experience, what I value, but during my doctoral work, my final paper, sort of a dissertation, was to prove that these characteristics work based on, the sports psychology. So it's not only like, yeah, I'm passionate about it. It looks good on a t-shirt, right? Or on a bumper sticker, but it's proven to work. So I often tell people that just because it's the word love, that doesn't mean we're going to hold hands and sing Kumbaya and everything's great all the time, right? But when you look at something that I'm really a big fan of, it's called self-determination theory. And this describes a person who's going to be intrinsically motivated. I know as a coach, I was really lucky. Every couple of years, I had the one athlete who I didn't have to say a word to ever. He was always going to give his best. He was the best coach, right? And it's like, wow, what if I could create 50 of those kids, right? Like that would be amazing. So I think other coaches would enjoy reading this section, because it talks about, okay, how do you get someone that you don't have to motivate? They want to be the best version of themselves. Well, when you look at self-determination theory, you mentioned this earlier, having some autonomy, right? Believing you are good at what you do is another part. And when we talk about effort and goal setting, I can touch back on that. But the final part is relationships. You have to have a relational component of who you're working with, right? If it's one of those that you just, don't like your environment, you don't like your coach, and you don't like this, you might get some short-term results, but in the long term, you're not going to have that intrinsic motivation to keep going. So how do you build that, right? And that's one thing I think other coaches might enjoy about reading this book is I do my best to guide you through creating your own coaching philosophy, right? But then I tell you about mine. I share about the science behind it. And then I give real examples from a high school football coach on how I did this each day, right? So one of the things we were pretty big on was food, right? You're going to get to their heart through their stomach type thing. But this all comes back from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, of talking about getting to the very top of that. But let's start at the bottom. You have to have your basic needs met, right? I was really lucky, John. I went to a high school. I didn't have to worry about where my next meal was coming from. During two-a-day football practices, there would be a group of parents who would serve us a lunch every day.
Mm-hmm.
And this is how spoiled and lucky I was. When I got to my first coaching job, I'm like, where are all the parents serving meals right now? Like, isn't that standard practice? The players had to pack their own lunch,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I remember one day walking through the cafeteria and a young man sitting there without a lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know. I should have asked him, but I was young and I didn't. I should have asked him, what's going on here? Because maybe he forgot to pack it, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has the stuff, he forgot it. Maybe he was told to pack it and was lazy and didn't. Or maybe he truly didn't have anything to pack.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And right there, I was 20 years old. I said, if I'm ever a head coach, we are going to feed our kids at every single practice.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's one of those things you're going to, the demands are going to be high. You're going to be asked to work extremely hard, but we're going to take care of you. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's going to love you like we can. So that took a lot of work on my part as a coach, right? Trying to organize all those meals. A lot of times it was me spreading peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, right? After school, before they got in the weight room, that kind of thing. But we were really big on that. The other thing I think, and you're probably familiar with John Gordon's one word book,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
he goes through, and this isn't, just John who does this. A lot of people, hey, come up with one word that's going to be your guiding force. So for me, the book is the lead, but I've had different words through the years. We had each kid go through this exercise and come up with his own one word, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the coach and the player met and talked about their motivation, right?
Mm-hmm.
What makes you want to be great? What makes you want to do this? And we would write it on their camp t-shirts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was just an opportunity for coach and player to spend time with each other and learn about each other, right? How do you spell love? Time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of my favorite examples of this was our punter one year. I didn't know much about him because he wasn't with us all the time. He just kind of came over and punted. His word was seal. And I'm like, seal? That's weird. Usually it's grit and grind and, power, strength. And I said, why SEAL? He said, well, I want to be a Navy SEAL one day. And I know to do that, I'm going to have to serve. I'm going to have to give effort. Right. And he went through kind of the lead acronym. And I said, this is truly amazing.
Yeah.
And throughout that season, anytime he started hanging his head, right, we could have that conversation about, hey, is that how SEAL acts right now? Right.
Well, that's the best thing, right? Like, you remind people, this was your goal. This was your word. This is your idea, not mine. So would you like to change your values, goal, word, or would you like me, and again, no, coach, you're right. Let's go. Right.
Yeah.
And for your team, it's the same thing. Stop. Is this what we talked about? Like, are we living up to our non-negotiables or whatever? No, coach, we're not. Okay. Let's be better.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was just a way for coaches and athletes to spend time together. But I feel like for the athlete to feel like their voice was heard and that coach really cares about me, they want to know about my goals and aspirations. So there's more, things in the book, but those were just a couple that came to the top of my head.
Mm-hmm. All right. So part two, I mean, effort. What does effort mean to you? And I don't think I have to ask, why does effort matter? I mean, of course, right? Most teams have effort or hard work or whatever as non-negotiables. But yet they oftentimes don't really live up to them, do they?
Yeah. Well, I think it's one thing to say the buzzwords, the catchphrases about working hard. One thing that I learned, and I refer to it kind of as ET, and it's about effort terminology and the way you're going to speak as a coach.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So when I was hiring coaches, one of the first things coaches would ask me is, what kind of offense do we run? What kind of defense do we run? What am I going to be? And it's like, no. That's not for a long time. Let's talk about how we coach people. And we talked about, okay, what are we going to focus on this year? Is it going to be the scoreboard, right? Or is it going to be about effort and that path to mastery, right? That the whole idea of, hey, even if we win, we didn't play perfect. We can play better, because as you know, you could play an inferior, opponent. You might win. It doesn't mean you played your best game. So we really tried to talk to our players a lot about mastery and show examples of, Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan. These guys never woke up believing they had it made, right? They're always going to kind of try to climb that mountain knowing they'll never get to the top. And I'm in education. I'm a school teacher. We talk a lot about a growth mindset. It's been out for a while, but if your listeners aren't familiar, Carol Dweck wrote a phenomenal book, called Mindset. And it's just talking about this story of you haven't done it yet. Right. So it's the idea of behavior is changeable. And, I'm not a starter on the team yet. Right. Because that word kind of puts the idea in your mind that you'll get there. You just have to keep working at it. Yeah. So I think it's kind of how we judge our success. We talk about a growth mindset and mastery, but also this idea of failure, right? I think it's, something we need to talk to our athletes that we're playing sport. We're not in the military where failure could be fatal, right? Chances are you're going to get to do this thing again. It could be next week or it could be later today. All right. But let's take this data. Let's learn from it. And again, that's easy to say, John, right? To learn from your mistakes, right? How many coaches have said that? One thing we did, and I thought this was just one of the best things we did. We had a magnetic board in every player's locker, and it was our daily goal setting board. Because how many coaches set goals at the beginning of the season?
And then never revisit them. They just
never revisit them.
Ever.
Right. But in the player's locker, they would come in, John, you open it up and it has our mission statement, it's got lead on it. But the first thing it does is it says, hey, what are 3 things you're thankful for today? Right. And when we talk about being positive, that's one way we would train it is every day, lifting, in season, they're writing down 3 things they're thankful for. And then we would say, hey, during today's practice, what is one goal that you have? Right. Because I lived under this notion when I was a high school athlete that I got better each time I went to practice. And we know that's not the case. You go to practice. It just means your body exists in that spot. It's not a video game where you progress 2 notches, every year. So we would say, what do you want to work on today during practice? And then at the end of practice, and this all comes from a book, Jason Selk wrote, 10-Minute Toughness, a former sports psychologist for the St. Louis Cardinals. But it's one of those, hey, what did I do well today? What's one thing I want to improve? And then between now and the next time we compete, how am I going to make that change? And the reason I like this so much, John, is the player, it took them a few minutes to do this before and after practice. I'm not eating into your practice time as a coach, right?
Right.
And as the player takes the field, you as the coach can walk over to your quarterback or your point guard or whoever you're coaching, and you can look at that goal board. And it says, hey, today I want to work on left-handed free throws. Today I want to work on, whatever the skill is for your sport, my top spin lob in tennis, whatever it might be. And we can have that conversation with the athlete during their dynamic warm-up. Hey, I saw you want to work on ball security today, right?
Right.
So, all right, take care of that football. I'm going to be watching.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you ever do anything after? I'm picturing this and I'm thinking, now this is a cool activity, right? And any coach, hockey, whatever, where the kids have a locker, like basketball, a lot of times you could do this, right? And then they go back to the locker room afterwards. Was there like a follow-up? Like, did I, achieve my goal for the day? Yes or no? Right? Like, did you guys do that or?
Well, so what we had is what did I do well today?
Yeah.
What did I, not do well? How am I going to fix it? But John, one place the follow-up would come is one day as a coach, I'm looking at their lockers after the players left. and it said, "What did I do well today?" And you know what the player wrote? Here I am thinking I'm the best coach since sliced bread, right?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
look at what we're doing. I open it up. What did
yeah,
I do well today? It said nothing.
yeah, yeah,
And that's where I was able, right, to number one, look in the mirror and say, I am not being as positive as I think I am, right?
right,
Number
right,
two, I could go to that player's position coach and say, hey, right, this player, we have got to do a better job at finding positive things. I know it might be tough,
mm-hmm.
right? But he is hearing that he did nothing well. And then I could follow up with that player the next day and say, put my arm around him and say, hey, you wrote nothing.
Yeah,
That's not true. We had to do something right. And let's think about that. Let's talk about it. There was also follow up in, the things that players would say they're thankful for. I'm thankful for my dad who gave me a ride to practice. And you're able to have that, text dad, call dad. Hey, just want to let you know that your son probably never thanks you, but he wrote it on his board today.
yeah,
So again, that's kind of where the follow up went. But again, John, this took time. This
yeah,
took time to do as a coach. It wasn't, practice is over and I'm gone. It took an extra 10 minutes to walk through and kind of
yeah.
those things. But I really think that's the best thing we did, in my opinion. I think that's such a something that every team could do.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, like habits and these behaviors and things like this, they're just, ticks in I think James Clear talks about it like it's a vote for who I want to be, right?
Sure.
Every one of these decisions is a vote for who I want to be. And I think about that from the standpoint of like, okay, if I have that in my locker room and I come back and I say, okay, what went well today for me or whatever, did I achieve this goal that I set? And then like, a sticker at the bottom, and in my locker every day, the sticker either goes on the yes, I did or no, I didn't. And look at that at the end of the season. Because if you're honestly doing it, right, and you're honestly, you shouldn't have all yeses because no one does that.
Correct.
Right. Everyone has bad days. Right. But it's like, if you're honestly looking at that going, there's a lot of no's there. Well, hey, those were all practice days that I didn't make the most of. What if I made the most of 10% more days, 20% more days? How much better would I be? And I think that's when we look back at our season and people go, well, why don't I play? How do I get better? Well, how many good days did you really have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love, by the way, coaches, what we do is we go to clinics and we have conversations and we take things and adapt them. So I'm totally gonna adapt that to our process. Cool. It's a great idea, especially too when you're sitting with a player who's frustrated that she hasn't improved, right? It's like, oh, like I live in this world of instant gratification. I want it now. Mm-hmm. And you're able to look at that board and say, hey, you might not have it yet, mm-hmm. but we just had 14 straight days of yes days. Mm-hmm. Okay. So maybe do we need to adjust the goal a little bit? Right. Right. So maybe we need to make things a little bit harder than what we've been doing. If you're getting yeses for 14, whatever it might be.
If it's that easy. I mean, I worked with a college team and I asked them once, I was like, honestly, you have four practices a week. How many of them are like top level attitude, top level focus, top level effort? And they were honest and they said, one. I'm like, all right, awesome. So let's get to two. Forget four. Yeah. Forget four. Let's get to two, right? Because if you get to two, you've already had twice as many good practices as you did last year. You're going to get better, right? Sure. And I think these are the type of things, right? Like we need these reach goals, but we also need benchmarks. How do I know that I'm working towards it? Right. And, you can get a professional athlete or even a college athlete to journal about practice performance and stuff like that. But I really think, right, how do you make it as easy as possible for a high school athlete? I'm sticking a sticker in one box or the other, and I want to see the boxes add up. Yeah.
Absolutely. I love it. Thanks for sharing that.
Oh, well, I mean, I've never heard of it done or seen it done. I'm sure someone's done it.
Yeah.
But it's interesting for sure. Talk about talk about just discipline, because we talk all the time on this podcast that I think the biggest thing that we do as coaches on the youth level, on the high school level, and even to a big extent on on the college level, is we're teaching behavior, right? We're teaching behaviors, because the right behaviors repeated over and over and over for a long time, that's what leads to performance, right? And so for me, when I see the word discipline, I feel like that's discipline, like showing up, doing the right thing day after day after day.
Yeah.
How do you talk to your players about discipline?
Well, again, we certainly talk about discipline. And one thing that we do, there's a video right now, depending on when people are listening to this. This is on November 16th, 2023, but a video going around of Steve Kerr talking about his core values.
Yeah.
He tries to instill them in each practice, right? So for
Yeah.
him, joy is a big, thing that he wants. So every practice has to reflect joy.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we did with our lead philosophy is at the top of our coaching plan, every Monday, yes, we tried to instill love, effort, attitude, and discipline into each practice, but every Monday was going to be a special emphasis on love. I wanted coaches to kind of, again, put a exclamation point by that. And it would say, how am I going to demonstrate that in my coaching today?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Tuesday was effort. Wednesday was attitude. Thursday was discipline. And we would always start the day out with just a 2 to 5 minute story about discipline, right? It might be a YouTube video, a handout, another coach. For any head coach who's listening, please try to get your assistant coaches to also take the platform and talk about these things and how they apply it in their life. Because it can't just be that, John, that you're the character coach and everybody's got to be doing the same thing. But we would talk about that word and funny things like for discipline days during 2-a-days, we would try for 5 minutes at team meal for players across the table from each other just to eat staring at each other the whole time. And it, kids are funny about it and kids are competitive. And, some kids would start laughing or whatever, but then you'd have the serious kid who I'm going to win right now just by looking at you so we would try to do things like that. But to take it back to my best coach, and I just watched my mom live out these principles. And for me, I said, okay, if I want to demand discipline, if I want to demand toes behind the line and, all those things that I think a good coach should do, then I need to live it. And for me, I heard on a podcast, I'm a big podcast listener, the winningest coach in the history of Texas high school football. So you imagine how successful this coach was. He had what he called a to-do list every day. And he would print this out on Saturday morning, the day after their game. And it would have each day on a separate sheet that he would put into his clipboard. And he just ran on autopilot. It had every single thing he had to do that day, right? So that tomorrow he could go through his list and by Friday night, the game was ready. Right. And there were some, funny things that made me laugh because I was at a very small school in Ohio. And this guy had film the weekly coaches TV show, things I wasn't worried about. But I said, that's great. I'm going to email this coach and get a copy of it. He sent it to me and I adapted it to my schedule. And I said, okay, what is every single thing that I need to do? And this changes from time to time in my life. But, when I was writing, I forget how many pages, my book, I said, I'm going to write for 30 minutes today and you got to cross it off. And I kind of live off this list. But as far as coaching, I'd have those conversations with coaches and say, hey, listen, we're big on discipline here. So we're not going to curse. on the practice field, and we're not going to curse in the coach's office because, believe it or not, those walls are pretty thin. And I don't think you can, talk like a sailor in the coach's office and then all of a sudden turn that off once you get outside. And for me, it's like, okay, if that's how you live your personal life, okay. However, let's control our tongue, right? And that is one way we can show our athletes that we are disciplined. And when we hear foul language from them, hey, that's not the way we do things here, right? Oh, I know, right? And we can ask them to be disciplined in simple things like not cursing. And then we can ask for, other things. And I think it's just kind of a snowball that runs. But discipline starts with you as a coach. I remember a kid that I coached who cursed. I lost my, my head about it. And I made him do some up downs, whatever. We're going to be disciplined. And he looked at me and said, hey, if coach can curse, right? Coach X, Y, or Z, he's dropping F-bombs. Why can't I?
Fair enough.
And I was like, you know what? He's got a point. So I think discipline starts with you as a coach. And even on my get to list, John, I have my work life, but I put that at the bottom underneath who I am as a man and a husband and a dad. And I try to separate that, this is what I do, but this is who I am. And I just have, personal goals for each day with my relationships with others. And I'm trying to work off the list every day. And that's just one way that I try to instill discipline within myself.
Yeah, I like this. And I love that we came back to your mom and this idea that it wasn't her way of doing, it was her way of being. Yeah. And, Jerry and I talk about this all the time. And in The Champion Teammate, we wrote that being a champion, it's not winning a medal, right? It's not something you become. It's just a way of being. It's a choice that you make that I am going to exhibit these behaviors every day to the best of my ability. That's being a champion. And sometimes at the end of the year, that ends up with, a trophy. And sometimes it doesn't, right? Yeah. But it gives you the best chance to be the best team or the best athlete that you can be. And your mom was this unbelievable example of being, right? Because just like the coach who curses and then punishes people for cursing, right? Like, you gotta walk the walk. You can't just talk the talk as a leader and within a program. And so you have to be a champion in the way that you go about stuff. And then you model that for your athletes, and then you demand of them that they do the same thing. And you create an environment where it starts to get uncomfortable not to be this way.
Yeah, correct. And I think it extends even further with, there's an officiating shortage around our country, right? And it's we watch coaches throw clipboards and do all this and scream and yell at officials. And then we get upset when the players raise their arms to officials or whatever. It's like, it starts with the coach, right? Yeah. And if we're going to ask our players to respect officials, I think we need to as a coach as well.
Yeah. And it's everything, right? Model what you want to see, be what you want to see, be the change that you want to see. And when you screw up, also be the one who points the finger at yourself. I mean, it's a very powerful thing when the coach says, that was on me, wrong game plan, wrong thing. Well, I'll be better this week, right? Versus if you come down and you start blaming, right, then the blame cascades. Well, if the defense could just get us the ball back, well, if special teams could get us decent field position, right? And everything's just blame. All right. So listen, we're coming towards the end here. I want to give you first, tell people how to get this book and how to connect with you. And then I want to just get your final thought for the day. But how do people get this book?
John, thank you so much for having me on. And the book, I've got it here. If you're watching on YouTube, it's called Lead, a Coach's Playbook on How to Positively Impact the World Through Love, Effort, Attitude, and Discipline. The easiest way to get it is on Amazon. If you just type in my name, Levi Nelson, LeviNelson, it's going to pop up. I also created an email address just to connect with coaches, and it's Coach Levi Nelson at gmail.com. I'm pretty big on Twitter, and if people want to send me messages or whatnot, my Twitter handle is R Levi Nelson. There's a picture of me kind of holding my hands up, pumping up the crowd at a coaching event. But that's the great part about coaching, is that your huddle gets bigger every year, and every clinic you go to and every person you meet. So I would just absolutely love to connect with any coach. If this philosophy resonates with you and you're trying, well, what are some more things you do? I would just be so happy if you would reach out to me, and if I could help in any way. That's the kind of the magic of Zoom now and all the technology we have. I can be here in Green Bay and connect with you that way. But again, Amazon, type in Levi Nelson, Twitter at R Levi Nelson, and just send me an email at coachlevinelson@gmail.com.
And we'll put all those in the show notes for everyone as well. Last thought, what do you want to leave people with who just listened to this podcast today?
John, I just feel sometimes you have that imposter syndrome, and being on this platform talking with you today and some of the guests you've had, I know over 350 podcast episodes. And this for me was like, let's try to reach out to the best podcast people I know in the industry. What you're doing with the conference in the summer, I am so lucky to be a part of this. So thank you for having me. And I just want people who've listened just to feel my appreciation for you listening to what I had to say. Right. And I hope this book, I think it would be very beneficial to anyone in a coaching or leadership position, right? Again, a coach is someone who gets a person from point A to point B. You don't have to wear a whistle to be a coach. So I think the book would benefit you, and just thank you for listening. I appreciate it so much.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the kind words. And I know, Jerry and I appreciate that, because there's many a time we're getting ready to record a podcast and we'll go, who'd have thought a couple years ago we'd be talking to Phil Jackson, talking to whatever, and so I appreciate that. Well, thanks for listening. And Levi, thanks so much for being on The Way of Champions.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you to Levi Nelson. Again, the book is Lead, Lead, A Coach's Playbook on How to Positively Impact the World Through Love, Effort, Attitude, and Discipline. And I don't think there's anyone who listens to this podcast who says, my program doesn't need more love or more effort or a better attitude or more discipline. We're always striving and trying to change those behaviors and add to those behaviors. So, thanks for being on. You can grab that at Amazon. And again, all his social and everything like that is in the show notes. So if you want to connect with him directly, I suggest it. If you're just listening, you can hear his energy and his enthusiasm and passion for coaching. So anyway, thanks to all of our Patreon podcast champions. Thank you to all of our huge supporters here. If you get a chance, leave some reviews, share this podcast, go out, grab the books, sign up for the email list at changingthegameproject.com and become a part of our movement to make youth sports better, to put some more play back in playing ball, to put some more care and love back into coaching, and to make people realize that their influence is never neutral. So go out there, change the world, make the difference this week, be the difference for your athletes. We'll see you again next week.